My husband knocked out my brother for calling me a whore. My parents want me to choose what is the right choice. I still can't wrap my head around how everything fell apart so quickly. If you'd told me a week ago that my husband would knock out my brother at a family BBQ, or that my parents would give me an ultimatum to leave my husband, I'd have laughed in your face. But here I am, torn between the people who raised me and the man who stood by my side through everything. The day started so normally. My parents were hosting one of their classic BBQs, a casual get-together they'd been doing for years. Everyone brought something to share, the smell of grilled meat filled the backyard, and kids ran around playing tag. My husband and I showed up a little late because I'd been finishing up some work emails, but as soon as we got there, it felt like the usual family chaos. My mom was fussing over the grill with my dad, my brother was hanging out with his wife, and my cousins were swapping stories by the drinks table. I thought it was going to be a perfect, relaxing day. Things shifted subtly at first. My brother, who's always been a bit blunt but never outright mean, started making these weird comments toward me. It wasn't anything glaring at first, just little digs about how I looked tired or how my outfit wasn't as fun as what I usually wore. Stuff I could brush off. But then, as we were sitting down to eat, he started upping the ante. He called me bossy when I asked if anyone needed more drinks and rolled his eyes when I laughed at something my husband said. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten, but I didn't want to make a scene. My husband noticed, though he always notices. After years together, he can read my body language like a book. He leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile, and told him I'd let it slide. My brother was probably just having a bad day, I thought. But he didn't stop. Over the course of the afternoon, his comments got nastier. He called me high-strung when I offered to help clean up plates, joked that I was always nagging when I reminded one of the kids not to climb on a table, and even made a comment about how lucky my husband must feel to put up with me. That one stung, and I could tell my husband was getting irritated. He shot my brother a warning look, but for the sake of keeping the peace, he didn't say anything yet. Finally, my husband had enough. After one particularly biting comment, I don't even remember what it was now, something about how I must have been insufferable growing up, my husband stood up and pulled my brother aside. I don't know exactly what he said, but when they came back, my brother looked annoyed, and my husband's jaw was set in that way that told me he wasn't messing around. Things settled down for a little while after that, and I thought maybe we'd gotten past whatever weird mood my brother was in. But then it happened. We were standing around in a loose circle, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn, casual laughter and snippets of conversation flowing easily among the group. I had just finished saying something about a funny incident at work when my brother walked up. At first, I didn't notice him. He came from behind, his footsteps light and deliberate. When I turned to acknowledge his presence, I immediately noticed the look on his face, a smug, almost predatory expression that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the look of someone joining a friendly conversation. It was something darker, something calculated. I froze the moment he spoke. "You know you're a fucking whore, right?" The words landed like a cannonball in the middle of the group, heavy and shattering, leaving an echo of shock in their wake. For a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning. The hum of conversation evaporated, the clinking of glasses and distant laughter silenced as though someone had muted the entire scene. My ears buzzed, and my heart plummeted into my stomach. I could feel the heat rushing to my face, the prickle of tears threatening to form, but I was too stunned to react. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. It was as if my brain had short-circuited, unable to process the sheer audacity of his words. All around us, heads turned. People's eyes darted between me and my brother, wide with disbelief. Some stared at me with pity, others at my brother with disgust, and a few seemed frozen, unsure of what to do. The air was thick with tension, so sharp and oppressive it felt like it was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth, trying to form words, but nothing came out. My hands trembled at my sides as I struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Did he really say that, here, in front of everyone? Why? And then, before I could even react, I felt it. A slight, firm push from behind, not rough, but decisive, guiding me gently to the side. My husband had moved so quickly that I barely had time to register what was happening. One moment, he was standing calmly at my side, and the next, he was a force of nature, stepping between me and my brother with a precision and determination I'd never seen before. His broad shoulders blocked my view, but I could feel the crackling energy radiating off him, a storm barely contained. Before anyone could process what was happening, the sound of impact split the air. A sickening thud, followed by a collective gasp. My brother crumpled to the ground like a marionette with its strings cut, his hands flying to his face as blood trickled from his nose. He groaned in pain, his smug expression replaced with one of shock and disbelief. The sight of him sprawled out on the grass seemed surreal, almost like it was happening in slow motion. And there, standing over him, was my husband. His fists were clenched at his sides, his body rigid with barely contained fury. His jaw was tight, his breathing controlled but heavy, and his eyes God, his eyes were cold and steely, filled with an intensity I had never seen before. The sheer command in his presence was overwhelming. He wasn't yelling. He didn't have to. His voice, when it came, was low and calm, yet it carried a weight that silenced everyone. "I warned you," he said, each word deliberate, like a blade slicing through the tension in the air. "You don't talk to my wife like that." Chaos erupted. My mom screamed, rushing over to my brother, who was groaning and clutching his face. My dad was yelling something, but I couldn't even make out the words over the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My husband, unfazed, turned to me and asked, "You okay?" I nodded, still too shocked to speak. My parents were livid. My mom kept shouting at my husband, calling him a violent brute and demanding that he apologize. My dad threatened to call the police, saying he'd press charges for assault. My husband didn't back down. "Go ahead," he said, his voice still calm. "But you should have stopped your son when he started disrespecting your daughter." The rest of the BBQ was a blur. My husband and I left soon after that, and the car ride home was quiet. I could tell my husband felt bad not for what he'd done, but for putting me in such an awkward position. When we got home, he apologized to me, saying he wished it hadn't come to that, but he wasn't sorry for defending me. I asked him to stop, he said, his voice firm. He didn't listen. He got what he deserved. The real fallout came the next day. My parents called me in the late morning, their voices unusually curt and serious from the moment I picked up. I had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning as I replayed the events at the BBQ over and over in my mind. I still hadn't fully processed everything: the humiliation of my brother's words, the way my husband had stepped in so fiercely, and the stunned, angry reactions of everyone around us. But as soon as my mom started talking, I realized the real storm was just beginning. Her tone was clipped, laced with disappointment and frustration. "We need to talk," she began, not even bothering with pleasantries. I knew then that this wasn't going to be a conversation, it was an ultimatum. She didn't waste time getting to the point. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've decided we can't condone what happened yesterday. Violence like that is unacceptable. We raised you better than to support someone who thinks it's okay to act that way." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I tried to interrupt, to defend my husband, but she steamrolled right over me. "You have to make a choice," she said firmly. "Either you leave him, or we're done. No more family gatherings, no more help, no more contact. We won't be part of your life if you're going to stay with someone who behaves like that." I was stunned. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt the tears welling up almost instantly. My mom had always been my rock, the person I turned to for advice and support. And now she was telling me that if I didn't leave my husband, she and my dad would cut me off completely. The certainty in her voice was chilling. This wasn't a bluff. They meant it. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "you can't be serious." He was defending me. "Do you even understand what happened? Do you know what he said to me?" I tried to explain, my words tumbling out in a rush. I told her about the relentless insults, the way my brother had spent the entire day tearing me down, and how he had capped it off by calling me something so vile in front of everyone. I told her about how my husband had warned him, how he had tried to de-escalate before it got to that point, but she didn't want to hear it. "We're your family," she snapped, her voice cutting through my explanation like a knife. "How can you side with someone who hurt your brother? Family comes first, always. What your brother said was wrong, But your husband didn't have to hit him. That's crossing the line. I was at a loss for words. How could they not see what my brother had done? How could they not understand how humiliating and degrading it had been to be spoken to like that, to have my character attacked in front of everyone I cared about? And how could they not see that my husband had been standing up for me, defending me in a way that no one else at that party had? The thing is, I don't blame my husband, not one bit. My brother crossed every possible line, and my husband did what he felt he had to do to protect me. I've never seen him act like that before, never seen him so angry, so ready to defend me at all costs. My husband is usually the calmest, kindest person I know. He's the type of man who goes out of his way to avoid confrontation, who thinks carefully before he speaks, who always tries to find a peaceful solution. But that day, when my brother called me something so vile, I could see it in his eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was hurt. It physically hurt him to hear someone speak to me like that, and it pushed him to a place I don't think he'd ever been before. When he hit my brother, it wasn't out of malice or cruelty. It was out of a deep, unwavering love for me and a refusal to let anyone, family or not, disrespect me in such a way. He doesn't regret it, and honestly, I don't think he should. My brother deserved to face the consequences of his actions, and my husband made sure he did. Yet, here I was, listening to my parents frame it as though my husband were some kind of monster, a violent brute who couldn't control himself. It felt so deeply unfair, so fundamentally wrong, and I didn't know how to make them see that. Every time I tried to defend him, my mom cut me off. "You're not seeing the bigger picture," she said. "He's your husband now, but what happens if he turns that anger on you someday? What if this is just the beginning?" Her words stung because they couldn't have been further from the truth. My husband had never so much as raised his voice at me in anger, let alone laid a hand on me. The very idea was absurd, but she wouldn't listen. To her and my dad, my husband's actions were inexcusable, and my brother's behavior was secondary at best. By the time I hung up the phone, I was shaking with frustration, anger, and sadness. My parents had always been my safe haven, the people I could turn to no matter what, and now they were telling me that if I didn't leave the man I loved, the man who had stood up for me when no one else did, they would cut me out of their lives entirely. It felt like my entire world was crumbling, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. But now I'm stuck. My parents are serious about their ultimatum, and my husband isn't willing to apologize. He says he's done trying to appease people who clearly don't respect him or our marriage. I'm terrified of losing my family. I've always been so close to them, and the thought of being cut off feels like losing a piece of myself. But I also can't imagine my life without my husband. He's my partner, my rock, the person who's always had my back. I don't know what to do. Every decision feels like a betrayal of someone I love. Update. First, I want to thank everyone for the overwhelming support and the constructive feedback. I've read every message, every comment, and it's truly helped me process this roller coaster of emotions. I also want to apologize if my initial post came off as unclear or poorly worded. I wasn't in the best emotional state when I wrote it, and honestly, I'm still trying to navigate everything that's happening. This has been one of the most challenging periods of my life, and I'm doing my best to take it one step at a time. To clarify, my husband is my choice. He has always been my choice, and at no point have I considered leaving him. He's been my unwavering source of love and support, and while I know some people think what he did was wrong, I can't bring myself to blame him for standing up for me. My parents' ultimatum hurt me deeply, but my commitment to my husband has never wavered. That being said, the situation has become even more complicated, and I find myself questioning things about my family dynamic that I've never really confronted before. It all came to a head when my parents invited me over for a talk. They made it clear that they didn't want my husband there, and while I understand why they might feel that way, their request didn't sit right with me or with my husband. He flat out refused to let me go alone. He said he wasn't trying to control me, but he wasn't going to let me walk into a situation where he felt I'd be cornered, manipulated, or emotionally piled on. His concern came from a place of love and protection, and after everything that had happened, I couldn't disagree with him, so we went together. Walking into my parents' house felt surreal. It used to be a place of comfort and familiarity, but that day, it felt like enemy territory. My mom's face fell the moment she saw my husband walk in with me. She looked ready to explode, but before she could say anything, he made it clear that he was there for me and not for them. He told them outright that if they wanted me there, he was staying too, and if they didn't like it, we would both leave. I agreed with him on the spot, which I think shocked them. Reluctantly, they let us stay. My brother was there too, sitting stiffly in the corner, refusing to look at either of us. The sight of him startled me more than I expected. His nose was bandaged, and his posture screamed discomfort, not just physical but emotional. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor, and he only spoke when directly addressed. For someone who had been so bold and cutting just days earlier, he now seemed small, almost shrunken. What came next was a mess of revelations and excuses that left me more confused than anything else. My brother's behavior, they explained, stemmed from his recent breakup. Apparently, his ex-girlfriend had cheated on him and left him for someone else, and he had been spiraling ever since. I hadn't known any of this because, honestly, my brother and I aren't that close. We've always had a surface-level relationship, and he's never really opened up to me about his personal struggles. According to him, the breakup had shattered him, and seeing my posts on social media about my life with my husband, our travels, our date nights, even the announcement that we were trying for a baby had only made it worse. He admitted that my perfect life had been a trigger for his jealousy and resentment. Every photo, every post, was a reminder of what he'd lost and what he thought he'd never have. It festered until it boiled over at the barbecue. Hearing me talk to my mom about our plans to start a family had apparently been the final straw. He couldn't handle it, so he lashed out at me. I tried to understand his perspective, but it didn't make sense. I couldn't wrap my head around why he'd direct all that anger and bitterness at me. None of it was my fault. I hadn't flaunted my life or intentionally rubbed my happiness in his face. My social media is mostly just pictures of me and my husband, nothing extravagant or boastful. And even if it had been, it didn't justify the things he said to me. I asked him directly why he called me a whore, why he chose that word of all things when he knows me better than that. I've been with my husband since I was 19, and he's the only man I've ever been with. My brother refused to answer. He just stared at the floor in silence until he eventually got up and left the room. The part that hurt the most was my parents' role in all of this. When I asked why they hadn't stepped in to stop him at the BBQ, their responses were gut-wrenching. My dad admitted that he'd wanted to intervene, but my mom had told him to leave my brother alone because he wasn't actually hurting anyone. That line stuck with me. Not actually hurting anyone. Did they not see the pain in my face as he tore me down in front of everyone? Did they think emotional wounds didn't count? And then there was the ultimatum. When I pressed them about it, they admitted that it had been my mom's idea. My dad, ever the follower in their relationship, had just gone along with it. My mom tried to justify it by saying they were trying to protect my brother, but when I asked why they hadn't prioritized protecting me, they had no answer. The silence was deafening. My husband apologized to my parents for the drama but made it clear he wasn't apologizing to my brother. He said he'd warned him and that his actions had consequences. My mom argued that hitting him was inexcusable, but my husband held his ground. When he asked my dad how he would react if someone called my mom such a vile name, my dad said he'd talk to them but never resort to violence. My husband laughed and called him spineless, which sent my mom into a fit of anger. I knew then that the conversation wasn't going to get any better, so I told my husband it was time to leave. Before we left, I told my parents I was going low contact with them. The ultimatum had broken my trust, and while I wasn't cutting them out entirely, I needed space to heal and reassess our relationship. My brother, on the other hand, was another story. Until he could acknowledge what he'd done and offer a sincere apology, I wanted nothing to do with him. My parents asked if this was permanent, and I told them it depended on their actions moving forward. As we were leaving, my husband still greeted them politely but told my dad it was time to grow a backbone. The look on my mom's face, shame, frustration, maybe even regret, was something I'll never forget. My dad glanced at her, and for the first time, I saw him hesitate, as if he was questioning whether his endless agreement with her was worth the damage it was causing. On the drive home, my husband apologized for escalating things but stood by his actions. He told me he'd take whatever fallout came and assured me I didn't need to stress or worrying about any of it. I don't know where this will go from here, but for now, I'm holding on to the one thing that's been constant through all of this, my husband. His love, his strength, his unwavering loyalty, it's more than I've ever felt from anyone else, and I'm determined to protect it, no matter what.